More Nooksack history. Many of the Nooksacks were asked, or perhaps tricked, into moving to the Lummi Indian Reservation here in Whatcom County, Washington State. That was about 1875, give or take a few years. And they did stay a few years. Not all Nooksacks moved down there, of course. My family, one that did. They did refuse to stay. After several years, they packed up and moved back up to their homelands here in the Linden, Deming, Everson area. My family comes from the Everson area, kind of in the middle of the Nooksack territory. So that occurred in the 1880s. They came back, found all of the old village sites already homesteaded by Americans. They found friends in the Americans that offered to help assist with the Nooksack Indians filing for homesteads. And that happened. There's some debate on which Homestead Act was actually used. I don't think Nooksacks or Indians in general were supposed to file for homesteads. We did. There were roughly 24 homesteads that survived from the 1880s. And having left the reservation like my ancestors did, and many of the other Nooksack families did, we were kind of left in limbo. Not really recognized by the federal government, and yet they knew of us and kind of unkindly took possession of our territories. So they couldn't really say we weren't here. They knew we were here. They sort of, in many ways, treated us like natives. By that I mean my father was taken in a covered wagon. He was born in 1913, so I'll say 1919. The covered wagon came, picked up him and all the other children in the area, and took them to boarding school, where they were forbidden to speak their own language. Later on in life, he could understand the Nooksack language. He would answer in English, refusing to speak the language. I'm not sure what they did to him in boarding school, but it worked. Even as an adult, he refused, afraid to speak the language. So moving on, 1934, the voting age Nooksack people voted to accept the Reorganization Act of 1934. This basically makes the Nooksack Indian tribe we'll say modernized Nooksack Indian tribe. It basically formed a model for the Nooksack government to follow, very similar to the United States government. They held elections and had tribal council, which is like a Senate, Congress, voted in for a few years, re-voted in or replaced with new members of tribal council. Of course, we were unrecognized, and that remained so until 1970s, early 70s. We had to prove that we were still functioning as an Indian tribe, holding meetings, conducting business as a tribe, and go to the government and jump through the many hoops designed, I think, to discourage recognition. But the Nooksacks persisted and finally achieved recognition. And then back to let's say stealing our lands. That went through the process of appealing to the federal government. And in 1965, we succeeded in a land claim settlement. I received $99.17 for the millions of acres of land we once utilized. Perhaps not like the civilized man did, but we utilized it nonetheless, relied upon it. That's an example. Mount Baker provided wool or hair was gathered from the bushes and branches on Mount Baker that were shed by the mountain goats, and that was woven in the form of blankets, sometimes mixed in with other materials like cedar bark. That's what my hat is made of, cedar bark. But if you pound it, it becomes more hairy-like material. Let's see, where else can I? In 1969, I believe it was, in the late 60s, the Nooksack people voted in our first constitution and bylaws, part of the requirements of the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934, create bylaws. In those bylaws, we stipulate how or who is eligible to be enrolled in the Nooksack Indian tribe. The homesteaders, there's about 32, I believe. Only about 24 survived up until today, as owned by members of the Nooksack Indian tribe. 24, if I count correctly. The descendants of those homesteaders are Nooksack, are eligible to be enrolled Nooksack. The next group of people are derived from the 1942 census, followed by those that received a payment for the 1965 land settlement. And I was actually old enough to receive a payment, so I qualified just through that. But my grandmother is a homesteader daughter, so I qualify through the homestead. My father was on the 1942 census. I think I'll stop here for today, follow up with more.